Memory transcription subject, Slanik, Venlil Space Corps. Date, standardized human time, January 14th, 2137. Standing in the cargo bay of the ship, gun in paw, numbness gripped my limbs. A spate of nightmares had plagued me throughout the journey, though they'd started in earnest on Venlil Prime. I often saw Marcel being held at gunpoint or with an Arxa bullet drilling into his helmet. The fiery stampedes on both the cradle and Silis were etched into my memories as well. Sometimes it was realistic enough that I could feel ash worming its way down my throat. It was as if my soul was missing in the downtime with the lack of gunfire. In most visions, I found myself carrying a gun like the one I toted now. Remembered emotions flooded back, and I envisioned my claws pulling the trigger. Reality made sense when I was on the battlefield. Coming back to civilian life on Venlil Prime had been what was alien. In my heart, I knew Onzo was right about professing my predator-diseased aggression. Marcel hadn't wanted to tempt fate, but I was itching to get back into the fray. The Predator refused to let me go alone, even if he'd been involved in enough ground occupations for 1 year. I understood that this was what life was now in order for humans to survive. Killing, killing, and more killing. Though, if I forgot the reason I was doing it at all, my mind might collapse. By this third deployment, I hoped to detach from the horrors a little. Violence was merely a certainty.
When are you coming home, Mausel?
Nulia's voice trailed from his holopad alongside a grainy image of the Gajid's face.
You missed Christmas! I made a gingerbread house with Mama Lucy!
The red-haired human smiled.
That's awesome. I don't know when I'll be home. But with me and Slanik gone, you had more to eat for yourselves. You don't want the salt monster learning the joys of sugar, do you?
No, but I miss you lots.
The Terrans had gotten an FTL comms network up and running weeks ago, and the technology had finally passed along to soldiers and civilians. It was easier than ever for humans to chat with aliens in allied systems, while also making it possible for troops to call their loved ones. I could admit a tinge of jealousy over Marcel's calls with his family. He had people who he knew would accept him, and he also looked happier talking with them than me. All that energy I spent caring about his welfare, and I would always be second-rate to him. It felt like I was on an island without anyone to support me. Hell, Marcel had humiliated me in front of Sovlin, insisting on us rolling over like prey. There were some things that couldn't be forgiven. I couldn't believe he'd pushed me to talk to that Gajid. I'm just happy we've left Monahan's ship. I wish I took that Gajid's head off while I had the chance. It's a shame I was too injured to see it through. I flexed my healed shoulder. It's time to get ready, Mars. We're almost in range of Milu.
All right,
He hissed, perhaps sensing my jealous tone.
I've got to go, Nulia. You be good for your mother now, all right? You've got to do your chores.
Do I really have to?
The Gajid whined.
You do if you don't want Santa to put you on the naughty list next Christmas. If you're good, you'll be rewarded in the end. Besides, you want to make our lives easier, right? It's been a hard year for us too.
Fine. I love you, Mausel.
Love you too. Tell your
Marcel sighed as the Gajid abruptly hung up. He fixed his hazel eyes on me and shrugged his shoulders in a nonchalant way. The human tickled the tip of my tail, causing my bushy appendage to jerk away. Watching him flash his teeth in a playful manner, I felt a bit better. My dependency on my best friend for happiness might be unhealthy, but I couldn't imagine my life without him. Terran soldiers were filing into transport, preparing to detach from our current carrier once we neared the target. Mission objectives ranged from inserting boarding parties into enemy ships to retaking space stations by force. Clearing out Milu itself would be an arduous task. It had taken weeks for the Kolshians to set down routes, and it could take an equal amount of time for them to be removed. That was assuming we prevailed against their secretive fleet.
It concerns me what conditions we'll find the Dossa subjected to. To think that they hate us so much that they'll brutalize anyone who tries to befriend us.
Marcel growled. I pinned my ears in hesitation. Is it true that the Arxa fought alongside the Dossa? I know it's a rumor, but it has me nervous they're here. Every time we land, they seem to show up and kill everyone. We're cursed.
Hey, it's only happened twice, but there is a pattern forming there. Milu might not want us two among the boots on the ground, buddy. Hell, I do feel a little cursed.
The Arxa. You're dodging.
Yes, Chief Hunter Isif himself helped them at our request, or so I hear. The Greys were only able to weed out a few thousand attackers, though that's a handful we don't have to face. We were able to get a couple hundred evac ships out because of his fleet, which took a beating for us.
The Kolshians gave a beatdown to the Arxa.
You could say the kid gloves are off, Slanik. You could also say they had the power to stop the Greys and let billions die instead.
I loaded onto a transport in silence, appalled by the truth of his words. The Federation allowed entire species to be genocided and billions of sapiens to be taken as cattle to retain control. Had they really concealed their true power just to encourage fear? The Kolshians hadn't wanted to win the war, and I couldn't think of a single other reason why. That realization culminated in fury. I was raring to plunk a bullet into their skulls. My biological brother died fighting the Arxa because the Kolshians willed it so. Everything we've ever done had been frivolous. All of this haunting death was for naught. Our transport had its own ability to monitor communications and a digitized replica of the bridge's viewport. We could transition between the host carrier's eyes and our own once we were cast into the stars. It was true that humanity had also faced numerical odds at Koa and Silis, and that they had triumphed all the same. By this point, I imagined the Kolshians had an answer for the shield breakers though. While we were at less of a numerical disadvantage this time, assuming our new allies showed up, our fleet would mainly be comprised of prey races. The Terrans must be expecting them to be discombobulated liabilities, but the Dwerten had been unequivocal about not accepting human direction or crew. We'd raised 35,000 of our own ships, but only 7,000 of those were UN vessels. At least the Dwerten had showed up. The military staff at the briefing hadn't been certain they'd uphold the deal. As one of the galaxy's 2 avian species, they were oddballs even before humanity's announcement. Their support ships were nothing groundbreaking, but they were able to raise an army to retake Malu in a few weeks. Their fleet was waiting on the fringes of the DOS's system prior to our arrival. According to the initial communications coming through on our systems, they were calling their alliance the Dwerten Shield. They'd gotten 44 races to donate a few hundred ships each, which was more than our prior total of allied species. I suppose we couldn't argue about their effectiveness, despite the flippant demeanor they held at humanity.
We're going to attack now. You Predators will help.
A Dwerten commander spoke curtly to the human fleet. The UN's reply was instant and unfazed.
Copy that. We're right behind you, Dwerten Shield.
The Terran Armada was laden with novelties, and our newer vessels had a bare-bones crew thanks to the automation of duties. The plan was for older vessels to be retired or retrofitted to require less personnel. However, Earth's current focus was sending out anything with guns and FTL engines. They wouldn't be scrapping any ships that had endured the prior battles. That was why Captain Monahan and our Sovlin-bonded idiot friend Tyler were being sent to enemy-occupied territory at the Federation's heart. Automated vessels pressed forward on the UN's front lines, though the foolhardy Dwerten insisted on leading the charge. Our hospital ships lingered on the fringes, ready to move in as needed. According to Marcel, humans considered such vessels non-combatants, but I imagined the Kolshians thought any Predator ship was fair game.
Here we go,
Marcel murmured. Thousands of enemy ships approached on the viewport feed, pulling away from the patrols of the system. They had been ready to face intruders at a moment's notice. Malu was encased by a multi-layered defense, and various stations were also fortified to the max. The Kolshians had ships that I didn't even recognize from Federation classes. For instance, cylindrical vessels that looked like a drainage pipe and odd pyramidal craft. A few executed maneuvers that would have killed any crew. Either they had inertial dampeners that broke the laws of physics, or more likely, they had drones. The Kolshians couldn't have figured out and built autonomous ships in a month. The Terrans aren't the only ones to think of such a thing. My humans' hazel eyes stretched wide with the same realization.
Since when do they have drones? You didn't even know what those are, Slanik.
Similar chatter erupted among the soldiers, with many offering some vulgar words about our enemies. Other Predators clad in armor were crammed into my transport as we were packed in for deployment. The plan for our particular unit was to retake a civilian research station close to an outer planet. That meant getting past this Kolshian fleet. They'd seemed to have dropped their prey facade entirely. That meant that humans were their first threat that required them to uncork their true power. Even the Arxa never offered a true challenge to their stranglehold on the galaxy, despite being presented as an undefeatable menace. It was clear in the Kolshian Farsal arrangement which ones were the enforcers and which ones were the brains. They have these since they realized you have drones, I answered. Or rather, they show that they have it. Marcel chewed his lower lip.
Of course. A manned vessel can't make decisions at the same speed. Fight fire with fire. Good thing we stepped up our game too.
The high-stakes clash had commenced on our screens. Humanity was following the cues of our so-called friends who led a reckless charge. Kolshian drones were clinically dissecting the first Werten shield ship to draw within firing range. The oddly shaped enemies made targeting wonky and forced the Avian Alliance to switch to manual firing. Even a human would have difficulty targeting a computer-piloted craft with its calculating ability. The Dwerten panicked, tossing out munitions without aiming at all. The Federation was unrelenting against our allies, dispatching missiles amidst their ranks. More gasps came from the humans as Dwerten shielding flickered out across the front line. I was inclined to believe that particular weapon was reverse-engineered. The shield's neat V formation was collapsing, and ships nestled behind the leaders retreated toward the UN ranks. Perhaps they should have let us lead the way after all. I guess we'll see what Marcel was saying about stepping up their game. It follows that he was referring to drones, but what improvements could they make? Sensing my confusion, the vegetarian gestured to an inlaid sensor feed. In the vastness of space, the tiny specks were nigh invisible. The microscopic craft barely registered on the data screen either. Even with the viewport zoomed into the maximum magnification, I wasn't sure these Terran miniatures were visible to the naked eye. It was easy for an unassuming Kolshian to write them off as debris. Can something that small even scratch a ship? I felt a shudder pass through the carrier as a wave of our cruisers and fighters dispatched to save the scattered Dwerten. I don't get how it could have any guns or missiles. Marcel grinned.
Ah, Slanik. It is the missile.
The humans' larger drones dispatched a series of shield-breaking missiles, which the Kolshian craft tried in earnest to deflect. Enough slipped through to cause shield outages, and our nanodrones closed the gap all the while. The United Nations held traditional munitions at the enemy, making them think our sole play was shield damage. Seconds later, miniature craft detonated across Federation hulls. Dozens of orange twinkles ravaged single enemies. Explosions were generally inadvisable right atop the engine compartment, and these drones were tiny enough to slip through armor chinks. Surviving Kolshian automatons pulled back to regroup and recalibrate shields. The Dwerten shield lingered with uncertainty as we pressed ahead toward Milu. The Avian Alliance was still reeling. They'd lost thousands of ships to our nemesis's unexpected technology. There was no shortage of enemy vessels remaining within Milu's surrounding vicinity. Our allies were a bunch of dunces, and the Kolshians had a nearly endless supply of ships to throw at us. The humans needed to fight their way close enough to deploy foot soldiers while turning 28,000 liabilities into a serviceable force. Perhaps the Dwerten were more willing to follow our direction now, with their pride wounded.
Dwerten shield, why don't you let us head in first?
The UN transmitted a message over the communication channel.
Jesus Christ,
A few soldiers in the transport were scoffing at the Avians showing. The Dwerten talked a lot of smack, only to be humbled so quickly.
You can fill in the gaps and the flanks, playing a supporting role. You're good at that.
You're manipulating us.
Answered a shaken Avian.
You don't order us around. We won't answer to your whims and wants. You disgust us.
Well, whether you like us or not, we're on the same side of this battle. This is what you wanted. Humans handling the brunt of this mission. You'd rather have us predators dying than your own people. Don't make me beg to have my troops perish for you. You know we can fight. That's all you think predators do, right? Sit back and let us kill these bastards. Now we're moving in, before the drones get set up. Let's go, all right?
Fine. This is very temporary.
I sure hope so.
Marcel grumbled.
I wouldn't want those guys watching our backs.
The human ships pushed further into the system, carving out a path for their herbivore allies to follow. Most species would have turned back with such severe adversity out of the gate. As everyone knew, the Terrans weren't most species. The Kolshians were rallying more ships to our locale. The worst of the battle was yet to come. I gripped my harness tightly and prepared for the duel of titans that was about to play out. These were the opening shots of a clash with humanity's toughest opponent yet.